You're lying in bed at night. Everything is quiet, but your mind isn't. You replay something you said earlier, a small detail, a tone, a reaction, and suddenly it matters more than it should. You start asking, why did I say that? What did she mean by that? What if I handled it differently? And now you're stuck because your brain thinks, if I just think a little more, I'll figure it out. But it never ends. And there's a reason for that. You don't just think, you replay, you analyze, you go over the same moment again and again and again until it doesn't even feel like thinking anymore. It feels like being stuck. You've probably noticed this about yourself. You can't just experience something, you have to understand it, why it happened, what it meant, what you should have done differently. And the strange part is, even when you figure it out, you don't stop. This is where it starts. You go through something, a conversation, a mistake, a moment that didn't sit right, and instead of letting it pass, you hold on to it. You replay it in your head, not once, but dozens of times. Psychology calls this rumination, a pattern of repetitive thinking where the mind loops over the same thoughts without resolution. And here's the problem. It feels productive, like you're solving something, but you're not. You're just staying inside it. Overthinking often acts as a form of cognitive avoidance. Instead of solving the problem, the mind keeps analyzing to avoid taking action or facing uncertainty. In simple terms, thinking feels like progress, so you don't act. And there's something else happening here. A lot of overthinking isn't actually problem solving, it's avoidance. Your mind keeps analyzing, not because it's finding answers, but because it's delaying action. Because once you act, there's risk, uncertainty, real consequences. So thinking becomes a safer alternative. It feels productive, but it keeps you stuck in the same place. Research shows that rumination isn't just a habit, it's a mental loop that feeds itself. The more you think about something, the more emotionally significant it becomes. And the more significant it becomes, the harder it is to let go. That's why overthinking is strongly linked to anxiety and depression, because it keeps your brain locked in unresolved stress. But here's what makes this worse for men. You don't talk about it. You don't process it out loud. You process it internally, over and over. So instead of releasing the thought, you contain it. And containment turns into pressure. Picture this. Something goes wrong. Not major, but enough to bother you. You don't react immediately. You stay composed. But later, you revisit it. You break it down. Analyze every detail. Try to understand every angle. And at some point, it's no longer about the situation. It's about control. Because thinking feels like control. If you can understand everything, you can avoid mistakes. If you can predict outcomes, you can stay ahead. That's the hidden belief. Think more so nothing goes wrong. But reality doesn't work like that. And deep down, you know it. Imagine you're in a conversation. You hold back slightly. Not because you don't have something to say, but because you're thinking ahead. How will this sound? How will this be taken? What happens after I say it? So instead of speaking naturally, you filter everything. And by the time you decide, the moment has passed. Research shows that excessive rumination impairs decision-making and reduces confidence because too many mental simulations create doubt and hesitation. The more you think, the less certain you feel, the harder it becomes to act. And this has a deeper effect than most people realize. The more you think through every possibility, the less certain you become about any single one. Because every option comes with a downside. Every decision has a risk. So instead of feeling clear, you feel stuck, hesitant, and over time, that hesitation starts to look like a lack of confidence. Not because you're incapable, but because your mind is overloaded with possibilities. This is what overthinking does. It slows you down. It disconnects you from the present. It turns simple moments into mental calculations. And over time, this becomes your default state. Not relaxed, not reactive, just constantly processing. Here's the deeper layer. Studies suggest that around 73% of people in early adulthood experience overthinking patterns at some point. So you're not alone. But here's what makes your version different. You don't just overthink occasionally. You live there. And the longer you stay there, the more it shapes how you see everything. You start expecting problems. You anticipate outcomes. You prepare for things that haven't even happened yet. And sometime never will. This is where overthinking becomes something else. Not just thinking, but mental simulation, running scenarios, predicting reactions, preparing responses, trying to control the uncontrollable. But there's a cost. Research shows that repeated negative thinking is linked to lower psychological resilience, meaning the more you overthink, the less mentally flexible you become. You become sharper, but also more rigid, more aware, but less at ease. And here's the part most people don't realize. Overthinking doesn't come from weakness. It comes from awareness. You notice more. You process more. You connect more dots than most people. But without control, that awareness turns inward and starts working against you. So what you're really dealing with is not a lack of clarity, but too much of it. Too many angles. Too many possibilities. Too many interpretations. And no clear endpoint. Final truth. You don't think too much because something is wrong with you. You think too much because your mind learned that thinking equals control, that analyzing prevents mistakes, that awareness keeps you safe. And in some situations, that's true, but not all. Because life isn't solved through perfect thinking. It's experienced through imperfect action. And once you understand that, you don't stop thinking. You stop relying on thinking for everything. And that's when your mind shifts. From constant analysis to controlled awareness, from overthinking to understanding. So if you've been stuck in your head, going over the same thoughts, trying to figure everything out before you move, understand this. You're not broken. You've just trained your mind to believe that thinking keeps you safe, that if you analyze enough, you won't make mistakes, that if you understand everything, you'll stay in control. And for a while, that worked. It helped you avoid problems. Avoid embarrassment, avoid regret. But at some point, that same system starts working against you because life doesn't reward perfect thinking. It rewards movement. And clarity doesn't come from thinking more. It comes from engaging more, from speaking before you've calculated every outcome, from acting before you've removed every risk. Because the truth is, you will never think your way into certainty. You can only move your way into clarity. So the goal isn't to stop thinking, it's to stop relying on thinking for everything. To know when to analyze and when to let go. To know when to reflect and when to act. Because your mind, it was never meant to be a cage. It was meant to be a tool. And once you understand that, you don't lose your awareness. You learn how to use it without letting it use you. And that's when everything changes.